complex wide array of exceptional services and amenities, as well as its prime location in the heart of New Kingston, Spanish Court offers incomparable comfort, convenience, and luxury. Or on the North Shore, Couples Resort Tower Isle offers that all-inclusive luxury that has become North America, but the entire globe. Perched on the lush coastline of Ocho Rios and providing that glamorous, all-inclusive feel, Couples Resort boasts seductive sweeping water views, a private white sandy beach, and its own namesake island. But let's delve even more deeply into the locations that have transformed Jamaica into easily in the world. We start with the divine destinations on Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, and Port Antonio. Let's begin with Negril. On the western has become known for its natural beauty, wrapped with a 7-mile ribbon of white sand beach, offering perfect conditions for remarkable coral reefs and calm, clear waters. Negril is a diver's paradise. None of Negril's hotels are taller than the natural resources, including the area's spectacular offshore reefs. Many of the hotels in Negril have been perfectly positioned to view Jamaica's majestic sunsets. Now, not far from Negril on the northwest coast, the magnificent Montego Bay. Montego Bay has grown into Jamaica's premier tourist destination with the largest and most diverse selection of guest rooms on the island. With its white sand beaches, Mobay's palm-dotted hills provide a lush background to long stretches of rolling meadowland. 5 18-holes are beautifully situated along the Mobay coastline and offer varying degrees of challenge. Scuba diving is spectacular in the protected waters off of Montego Bay. You can take a relaxed ball, a historic mansion haunted by the ghost of the notorious Annie Palmer, who murdered 3 husbands before meeting her. And to unwind, you can enjoy the quaint shops at the Crafts Market on Harbor Street. From reggae to rock, clubs throughout Montego Bay provide visitors with an nightlife. Now, toward the center of the North Coast, the Jamaican jewel, all activities on the island. How about Starland depicted the world's fascination with 4 Jamaican men who tried out for and made the 1988 Winter Olympics in bobsled.
They were the first bobsled.
To highlight the remarkable achievements of the Jamaican bobsled team, who returned to compete in the Olympics in 1992, the Jamaican hotspot of Ocho Rios on Jamaica's north coast developed Mystic Mountain.
You take a sky lift points in the town of Ocho Rios, and you jump on a 1-person or 2-person bobsled, and you come down the mountain on tracks, and it's a huge thrill. And of course, that's based on our participation over the years in Jamaica's bobsled team.
Atop Mystic Mountain, you can also enjoy a zip line, a water slide, an infinity pool, shops, a restaurant, and a museum. Dunn's River Falls, which can only be described as a national treasure, featured in the very first James Bond film, Dr. Feet directly into the Caribbean Sea. Now, for the physically inclined, locals and tourists alike cascades over the natural limestone terrace. And while it may seem that Dunn's River Falls had to have been man-made to allow for climbing, the falls are totally natural, and all of the structures, crevices, and native pools were created by the actual flow of the water's current. Climbing the falls with or without a guide, the 1-hour hike will bond you of nature as nothing you have ever experienced before. And as if that experience with nature with falls.
We are at Dolphin Cove in Ocho Rios at the largest marine park in the Caribbean.
And at this marine personal, literally, with a creature that has fascinated mankind for centuries.
The dolphins have a love and an affection for people, and it appears that they're always smiling and happy. They love people. So being able to go and so close to them and pet them and kiss them, and they can push you around, is an awesome feeling.
That is an understatement. From the belly ride to the dorsal pull, from the kiss to the foot push. You will never forget but Dolphin Cove offers so much more. You can visit with sharks. You can play with stingrays. You can go kayaking. Enjoy a mini boat ride.
We have a nature trail, animals of birds, snakes, iguanas, and we have a wonderful aviary where you can go in and feed the birds.
Without it, you never forget. Now, after such inspiring toasts, you will surely be craving some Jamaican cuisine, and what could be better than Jamaican jerk? Now, before you devour some Jamaican jerk chicken, you must take a quick detour right off a roadside to quench your thirst with an authentic Caribbean coconut. And believe you me, you have never had your thirst quenched like you do when drinking the cool, refreshing coconut water directly out of the shell. Okay, now that you're hydrated...
Well, the history of jerk chicken dates back to days of slavery. Many slaves escaped the slave plantations and actually escaped up into the hills and formed their own independent free communities. And these slaves were known as the Maroons.
And these escaped slaves, or Maroons, incorporated African gastronomy from their native lands into their cuisine.
That is actually you rub into different kinds of meat, and it's made of pimento, Scotch bonnet peppers, scallion, onions, thyme, different seasonings that are very spicy. So if you go to a place called Boston Beach, just outside of Port Antonio in the parish of Portland here in Jamaica, that's where the origins of jerking started.
Now, if you're wondering where in Jamaica you can order up this...
It's sold right across the country, whether you're at a hotel, you're at a roadside stall, or get jerk chicken or jerk fish.
But it's hard to deny that one establishment in Jamaica is known for cooking up the best jerk on the island.
We're now here at Scotch's. So we have one in Montego Bay, there's one in Kingston, but you also have one right here dead center in Ocho Rios. And what is absolutely fantastic about Scotch's is their consistency. You can come to Scotch's last year or the year before, and that great quality still remains the same. Now remember that it's actually not food that is cooked by a jerk, but it's actually jerk seasoning.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. You just heard mention of Boston Beach, the birthplace of Jamaican jerk. Well, on the far east of the North Coast sits Boston Beach in the parish of Port Antonio. And this parish boasts one of the most unique resorts in all of Jamaica. It's Jamaica with a Jewish flair. Yes, Great Huts on Jamaica's North Coast offers an island vacation unlike any you have ever experienced.
Great Huts is an Afrocentric, eco-friendly retreat resort where you come to relax, come to unwind, and you come to embrace nature. We are very artistic, and as such, you come to Great Huts not only to be in the bosom of nature, but you come to Great Huts to embrace art.
But wait, how does an Afrocentric, eco-friendly, artistically infused Jamaican resort meld with Judaism? Well, it's based on the vision of the founder of Great Huts, a Jewish American from Washington, D.C., Dr. Paul Rhodes.
What he did was to build this Afrocentric village, but in this Afrocentric village, there are Jewish motifs all over the place. So you're going to find everywhere you go, you'll see a little bit of the Jewish story itself.
Everywhere you look, you will notice art depicting Jewish themes, Jewish symbols. The Tower of King Solomon, with its carved door and inlaid tiles, magnificent mezuzahs on the doorposts of the huts, Jewish stars, Jewish treasures. But what's the connection between the African story and the Jewish story?
Black African people and Jewish people, we share a similar history, a similar story of repression and exile. As you know, the Jews were in exile, and the Africans who came here were forcibly exiled to the Caribbean, to the West Indies, to work on the sugar plantations.
But for Jews, that exile was not only the exile from Israel, but the expulsion from Spain and Portugal in the late 1400s, with many Sephardic Jews and their descendants landing in Jamaica. Which brings us to the Great Huts program, Jamaica Shalom.
Jamaica Shalom is that program that Dr. Rose has brought onto the property to help to tell the story of the Jewish exiles in the sense that the Jews came here once again from oppression and repression from Spain. So once a year we set aside a week where we take guest visitors all over the place to some of these retentions of the Jewish story, especially the Jewish cemeteries, the old synagogues and the ones that are still operating. So it's about that journey back to Jamaica, that journey all over the place to see where the Jews have made an impact and to see where the way they had settled.
But that's not all.
Great Huts, Paradise on the Edge, operates a shelter in Port Antonio. Participants, they go into the community to help with whatever way they can in terms of giving back to the community. Our homeless shelter in Port Antonio is one of such places that they do go to help the homeless.
So when you are looking for a vacation with an element of tikkun olam or giving back built in, Great Huts Resorts in Port Antonio might just be the place for you. So there are your 4 destinations on Jamaica's north coast: Negril, Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, and Port Antonio. On the south coast, travelers in search of privacy and solitude will enjoy the isolated beaches in this area of Jamaica where the only footprints are your own. And also on the south coast, Jamaica's capital city, Kingston. At the center of Jamaica's government and commerce, Kingston is also Jamaica's cultural heart with a wide variety of historical and cultural attractions. For example, Devon House, built by George Stibley, born to a black Jamaican mother and German Jewish father.
I love Devon House because I love its symbolism. I love the fact that it's a place that it's Jamaica's first black millionaire's home. And I love the fact that when you come here, you have a sense of that, but it's also this gathering place of Jamaicans from all walks of life who come here to just enjoy the lawns, enjoy the vegetation. They have beautiful gardens, beautiful plants. Have an ice cream, which is Devon House ice cream, which is pretty fabulous. And just basically sit around, and it's communal. Also, Devon House has the most amazing trees. So many trees have been cut down all over the world, and here they're preserved, and there's a couple in particular that have enormous trunks.
Now, when investigating the history of Jews in the Americas, Kingston, indeed all of Jamaica, plays a starring role.
There is a significant Jewish impact in Jamaica, a significant Jewish story. You can never tell the story of the Jamaican people without incorporating the story of the Jewish people.
So you can also get a healthy dose of Jewish history on this Caribbean island. So let's start at the beginning, which for Jews of the Iberian Peninsula in the late 1400s.
It is estimated that perhaps the Sephardic population at any given point in time in the Iberian Peninsula was in excess of 200,000. 15 to 20% of the population of the Iberian Peninsula was Sephardic.
Now, when most Americans hear the historical event that immediately comes to mind, the Spanish monarch's decision to send Christopher Columbus on his voyage to the New World. Yet for world sad chapter in Jewish history. On the same day that Christopher Columbus set sail, the King and Queen of Spain issued their Edict of Expulsion. The Spanish Inquisition had begun.
For Jews, they were presented with impossible choices. You either had to abandon the faith of your fathers and convert to Christianity, or you had a crypto-Jew or a Marrano, or you had to leave the country that you were. If you were a crypto-Jew and on the surface in your everyday life you appeared to be following Christian theology, but in your home privately you retained the religion of your fathers and you practiced Judaism, and you were discovered, you would then face torture and almost certain death, and sometimes that death could be very horrific, where in what was called an auto da fe, people were actually tied to a stake sometimes whole families, and burnt to death.
Perhaps about half of them went over to Portugal, and then there was a mass conversion in 1497.
And Portugal's Sephardic community, even before the flood of Spanish Jews arrived, made up a vibrant part of Portuguese society, totaling 10% of the overall population, or about 150,000 people.
Of the Sephardic community that were expelled from the Iberian Peninsula either made homes in North African towns and cities, or in the Levant, as far across as Turkey, or they made their way to northwestern Europe, where a large number settled in what we know of as Holland today, which originally was called the Low Countries, and would have settled in. Amsterdam had the major Sephardic community of northwestern Europe. And then from Amsterdam, of course, once the Dutch conquered northeastern tip of Brazil, which was held by Portugal, but which, because of the union of the Spanish and Portuguese thrones, had then become part of the Spanish Empire under Charles V. Then you had a Dutch community being set up in Recife, in Brazil, in the what is today the states of Pernambuco, and because the Dutch were tolerant from a point of view of religion, then a Sephardic community established itself in Recife with 2 synagogues and a vibrant community.
In fact, when Dutch Prince Maurice issued his edict of religious toleration, New Holland, the Dutch name for their colony in northeast Brazil, became the first legal settlement for Jews anywhere in the New World. And when the Sephardic community in Recife consecrated the Kahal Zur Israel Synagogue in 1636, the temple became the first Jewish congregation in the New World. And some historians estimate that at its peak, Dutch Brazil had a larger Jewish population per capita than even Amsterdam, with the Jews of Recife comprising 35% of the white population. But the Dutch adventures in Brazil during the 1600s did not last long.
By the late 1640s, the Portuguese were fighting a battle of reconquest aimed at driving the Dutch out of Brazil. And of course, this was achieved. And the Sephardic communities then were faced with the dreadful choice of would they remain in Brazil? And if so, under what conditions would they remain in Brazil? Would they once again become crypto-Jews? Would they become Christian? Would they become subject to the Inquisition and the Ordre da Fé? Or would they leave and go back to Amsterdam or other capital cities in Europe, or do what they did, which essentially was to look for islands in the Caribbean to settle?
More on the other side. We're back. So Christopher Columbus had colonized Jamaica on behalf of the Spanish monarchy in 1494.
And on the 4th voyage, he ends up in Jamaica.
In fact, historians believe that they can pinpoint exactly where Columbus landed in Jamaica on May 4th, 1494, on what is known today as Columbus Park on Discovery Bay along the north coast of Jamaica. But in this instance, the Spanish adventures in Jamaica were actually cut short.
1655, under Oliver Cromwell, Penn and Venables, the admiral and the general, were dispatched here to the Caribbean to seek lands on behalf of Britain. They entered into the Kingston harbor here, very little defense, easily took Jamaica and established Jamaica in British hands.
And historians believe that the Sephardic Jews played a notable part in Britain's ability to capture and maintain control of Jamaica.
We believe that Manasseh ben Israel from Holland helped to create the Grand Western design for Cromwell, the protector, and as a result of that, the Cromwellian interests created a fleet with an army to come and capture ostensibly the Dominican Republic, and they were beaten back out of Santo Domingo. And then they ended up in Jamaica.
When the British captured Jamaica from the Spanish. They had a very good rapport with the Jews because the Jews assisted them in the capture. So the British were very, very grateful to the Jews.
As a result, the British welcomed Jews into Jamaica from the outset.
Jamaica allowed Jews in when the English captured Jamaica in 1655. The synagogues that we were building in the Caribbean were older than even the old synagogues in America.
In fact, Jamaica's Jewish community quickly grew quite sizable. So sizable that in the Jamaican community of Spanish Town,
in the early 1700s, it was estimated that there were more Jews in Spanish Town than the entire continent of North America.
and author Edward Kritzler's book, Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, sent shockwaves through the modern Jewish world when he uncovered that many of these Jamaican Jews aided the British in their battles against Spain through high seas piracy, much of it headquartered in Port Royal, nestled mere miles from Kingston, and once known as the richest and wickedest city in the world.
Even the Jews were amongst that group of pirates. Spain, in its dominance of the world, had offended and irked many individuals, and the Jews were one of those individuals.
Ahoy vey! And what had Spain done to irk the Jews? Well, they imposed the Spanish Inquisition, which made the Jews obvious allies for the British as they seized Jamaica from the Spanish in the 1650s. Now, one of the most prolific Jewish pirates working for the British against the Spanish, Moses Cohen Henriquez.
Moses Henriquez became prominent as one of the leaders, apparently, of the expedition by the Dutch to capture back part of Brazil from the Portuguese, and as a result was known as a pirate, maybe a marine terrorist, but he certainly became a very wealthy player in the New World.
During the piracy period, which was when Port Royal was at its heyday in the 1600s, Moses Cohen Henriquez was a notorious pirate in the day, and he had a brother. Whatever he looted, his brother would bank.
Now, Moses Cohen Henriquez left a legacy of descendants in Jamaica that includes none other than Anna Ruth Henriquez.
And I am actually his relative.
Yep, the family tree of Anna Henriquez traces all the way back to that notorious Jewish pirate, Moses Cohen Henriquez. And historians believe they can identify the resting place of that notorious pirate's wife, Elizabeth Henriquez.
This is a grave of Moses' wife.
And if you look through the Hunts Bay Cemetery in Jamaica, you can see symbols on countless tombstones that pay homage to Jamaican Jewish pirates. Now, the Hunts Bay Cemetery survived the ruinous Port Royal earthquake of 1692, and the site serves as the resting place for untold Jewish pirates and remains the oldest Jewish cemetery in Jamaica.
This has, by virtue of the records that we've done here, approximately 359 Jewish graves. We have the earliest grave here with an inscription is 1672. But we do suspect that there were earlier graves, earlier burials.
Now, Jamaica's Jewish community ceased burials at the Hunts Bay Cemetery in the early 19th century. Around that time, Jamaica's Jews opened the Orange Street Cemetery in the heart of Kingston, which continues in operation today. And some of Jamaica's most accomplished Jews are buried here.
We have the Delgado family, which Moses Delgado was one of the architects of the removal of civil disabilities in the 1830s, about the time of emancipation, which Jews then were allowed to own land and have a vote.
And then there's Joshua de Cordova, one of the two de Cordova brothers.
Both brothers decided to form the Gleaner Company. The Gleaner has been around since 1834, and that's a very impactful year for Jamaica. That's abolition of slavery year. So the fact that they're the longest running daily paper is really great for us.
Sir Neville Ashenheim, who, with Jamaican independence in 1962, became
the first ambassador from Jamaica to the U.S.
And Sheila Chong Henriquez, Miss Jamaica, 1959, wife to Ainsley, mother to Anna. And speaking of the Henriquez family, you may be familiar with Grammy award-winning Jamaican reggae artist Sean Paul Henriquez. Well, Sean Paul's paternal grandfather descended from Portuguese Sephardic Jews who immigrated to the island in the 1700s. And Sean Paul purportedly attended Hillel Academy in Jamaica. We'll be right back. We're back. The Jews of Jamaica did not remain exclusively in the Kingston area in prior centuries for one simple reason: sugar.
Sugar, the sugar industry, is what made Jamaica the jewel in the British colonial crown.
What the Jews had was expertise in creating sugar, in growing the sugar cane, in the harvesting of it, and of course in the export of the commodity sugar and rum.
And so throughout Jamaica, we find evidence of Jewish communities. For example, in the North Port town of Falmouth.
Falmouth was founded in 1769, and there is evidence that Jews came to Falmouth as early as the 1790s. Trelawney, the parish that we're in, Falmouth is the capital, was the biggest sugar producer in Jamaica at the time.
And remember Moses Delgado, who was instrumental in the Jewish emancipation movement in Jamaica? Well, some members of his family moved to Falmouth.
One of the families, main Jewish families here in Falmouth, and their descendants still live here today, is the Delgado family. They came here probably the mid-1850s from Kingston, and they were merchants. One of their buildings is directly behind you here, which was Delgado and Son, and another building was over here. I believe it was called Emmaville, and they probably would have resided there.
And the community's Jewish cemetery has survived in Falmouth throughout the centuries. And some notable Jewish Jamaicans or their relatives are interned in Falmouth. For example, let's take David Lindo, a successful agricultural scientist during the 19th century. Now, he has both an ancestor and a descendant of significant note. As for David Lindo's ancestor,
we can trace back David Lindo to Wow Rodriguez Lindo. His name is in the Inquisition papers.
And as for David Lindo's descendant, you may be familiar with Chris Blackwell, the wildly successful founder of Island Records who discovered the legendary Bob Marley.
David Lindo, that's buried here in the cemetery, is actually the brother of Chris Blackwell's grandfather.
And one of David Lindo's great-grandchildren, also named David Lindo, proudly recognizes his connection to this remarkable family. Now, back in Kingston, Jamaica's National Museum maintains some exquisite Jewish artifacts dating back to the late 17 and early 1800s.
This is a Torah scroll, very beautifully decorated with this sort of ivory finials. We're now looking at a Torah pointer, or yad, which means literally hand, I believe. We know a little bit more about this because it actually has an inscription on it which says that it was given by a Mr. Levy, but it also tells you what date it was given by Mr. Levy, and that was the year 5555, which, as I understand it, is actually 1795. And here we have what is known as a keteret, which was used for burning incense. We think it's from about the late 1700s, but it could also be about early 1800s. And here we have a shofar, which, as you know, would be blown at special religious events. It has a nice sort of metal attachment here at the top, which is very sort of decorative and attractive. It sort of looks sort of 19th century to me.
The collection also includes two magnificent menorahs.
This came with a handwritten card saying that it was donated by Mr. Andrade, and we believe it came from Spanish Town, and there used to be two synagogues in Spanish Town. And here we have another menorah, much more ornate and much heavier than the last one. This came with the same inscription from Mr. Andrade,
whose name we can still find in the Kingston Jewish Cemetery, and the charming Rebecca Brandon.
Rebecca Brandon had a shop on Harbour Street, which is a stone's throw from here, Harbour Street and Orange Street. And that used to be a flourishing commercial centre. So she was a widow, but she managed to establish a small business empire on Harbour Street. And she had Rebecca Brandon's Fancy Warehouse, which was a very successful shop. One of her very interesting lines was a range of very sort of fancy ceramics, and what she did was she used to write small pieces of poetry and make images as well. She would sell them in her shop to the newly emancipated people who were wage earners. And she even included some very clever sort of self-advertising in her poetry. So in her, so ye may have a good crop, then receive your wages, forgo, spend.
Welcome back. Now, while the Jewish community may have dispersed throughout the island in earlier centuries, in the 21st century, the community has centralized back in Kingston, and their unified place of worship has been touted as one of the most stunning synagogues in the world. Now, due to natural disasters,
this synagogue was finally rebuilt in 1912, but it's built on the classic style, earlier synagogues, and the practice of sand on the floor, which exists in, I think, 4 synagogues in the Caribbean, is still.
Yes, you may have heard about synagogues whose floors are literally covered in sand. Worldwide, nations maintain synagogues with sand on their floors. One of the original sand floor temples, Portuguese synagogue in the Netherlands. There is the Mikveh Israel Emmanuel Synagogue in Curacao, and the Hebrew congregation of St. Thomas, the Neve Shalom Synagogue in Suriname, and of course, the United Congregation of Israelites in Jamaica.
The most common explanation is that the practice originated in the northern part of Brazil. People who had been Catholicism under duress were apparently trying to secretly practice Judaism, and so the sound was indistinguishable. The custom could also have originated in Amsterdam, where its purpose was much more utilitarian, to keep the Jews as populous as the sands of the seas.
Or
it might remind us of the force takes away the sound of approaching shoes, so as not to disturb someone who is concentrating on their prayers.
And the members of this synagogue reflect the dynamic diversity of Jamaica today. You've met Ainsley Henriquez and his daughter Anna. Remember, they descend from a Jewish pirate of the Caribbean, Henriquez, circa mid-1600s.
I'm also of descendant, which I can prove, backwards Fanti family. And I'm a descendant of the Belinfanti family.
Yes, Ainsley Henriquez can trace his roots directly to the era of the Spanish Inquisition through Ainsley's 13th great-grandfather, a Portuguese Jew named Joseph Cohen Belinfante. Pivotal roles in the development of the Jewish communities, not only in Jamaica, but through his father's side with the first synagogue in the United States.
His family is there.
And through his mother's side with the oldest synagogue in England.
Her ancestors were also Sephardic and actually sent a rabbi to the community from Jamaica to the Beavis Mark Synagogue in London.
And of course, the Lindo legacy is alive and well in Kingston. You remember David Lindo's great-nephew, Chris Blackwell.
He founded Island Records, who signed a man off the street. His name
Howard, Errol Flynn, and Ian Fleming. Well, Blanche Lindo owned an estate in Kingston, now known as the Terra Nova.
It was built in 1924 as a lovely family home for Black.
Their Portuguese Jewish roots in Jamaica to the late 1600s. Now, the Hussey family has developed the Terra Nova into Kingston's most luxurious and lounge. From its pristine pool to its glamorous gaming lounge.
We spared no cost in making sure that all the modern amenities are provided for. For example, we've recently refurbished all our rooms, and they are to the highest standard. They are the finest Caribbean luxury.
And in their spare time, the Hussies have become active members of Jamaica's Jewish community. As for Eleanor,
felt more at home and at ease and in tune with my own values as I do with our community. Percy and I married in the synagogue, born into the faith. Percy and I have 6 children. We have 4 girls and 2 boys. And so far, our 2 eldest have been bar and bat mitzvahed respectively.
And Eleanor has become a bona fide leader in the Jamaican Jewish community.
Now I'm very proud and happy to...
Welcome back. You've met the rabbi of Kingston's congregation, Rabbi Dana Evan Kaplan, a native New Yorker. Well, he moved from North America to Jamaica to become the first ever Chabad emissary couple on the island. But in some ways, this arrival is served as a Chabad rabbi on the island back in the late 1950s. Now, interestingly, while the Raskins visit the capital city of Kingston on a weekly basis, how about Vered Maoz? She and her family moved to Jamaica from Israel.
We never knew where is Jamaica. We thought Jamaica is in Africa.
Mediterranean food to the Caribbean, and is it tasty?
And since I came to Jamaica, and I make the different, it's a kosher food that you can't find in Jamaica.
And then there are Jamaicans. Meet Dr. Winston George Mendez Davidson. He acts as a lay cantor at the United Congregation of Israelites. And this physician traces his Jewish roots all the court doctors in Portugal.
When asked by persons, you're a Jew.
Or Justice Major Carl Beresford Abraham Estick. He also serves as a lay cantor.
Has kept me on track. It keeps me quite highly focused about almost things in my life. The Jamaican Jewish community it's like a family.
Or Patrick Mudahy. While Mudahy finds Jewish roots on both sides of his family, he can trace directly through
of heritage and a background to give you strength of life. And that is what Judaism has done.
Now, in addition to these trees include Jewish roots.
Some of them are carrying Jewish ancestry and Jewish names, so they need to know something of their origins. What?
Yeah, quite common. A lot of leaves, but family leaves all over Jamaica. One time my mom said, my father is Jewish.
Now get ready for role model. Well, Jamaicans routinely acknowledge obvious, overt connections between Judaism and Rastafarianism. Dreadlocks? Well, the dreadlocks symbolize the locks of the Lion of Judah, which the Hebrew Bible states is a symbol of strength. And these connections are not accidental.
The Rastafarians follow the Old Testament or the Bible, to the T.
Throughout Rastafari, we're reaching back for our homeland which we have lost. This is the Exodus. We have been in the wilderness for all these years. Like the Israelites, in the wilderness, separated from their homeland, from their true home.
For Jews in the diaspora, that homeland is Israel. For the Rasta of Jamaica, that homeland is Ethiopia. And their Messiah in Ethiopia, the mid-20th century Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. And guess from whom Haile Selassie descends?
His ancestry was traced all the way back to the meeting of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And that was the beginnings of the dynasty.
Yep, the Rasta believe that their Messiah is a direct descendant of Solomon, king of the Jews. So you can uncover these uncanny connections between Judaism and Rastafarianism by visiting the Bob Marley Museum in the heart of Kingston. Ah, Jamaica, home of majestic mountains, beautiful beaches, wondrous waterfalls, crystal clear water, and secret coves. Throw in Jamaica's dynamic Jewish history, and that's what you can call all right. Jamaica, memories to last a lifetime.